Hey, welcome. My name is Kirby Ingles, and I'm a leadership and transformation coach, a father of four, and an Army veteran. And today I wanted to talk to you a little bit about defining your fears rather than your goals in 2020. Now you're like, Kirby, this is pretty crazy. Why would you do that? We're so used to doing goals, right? Hey, Teddy, thank you for watching. And so you're probably like, why would I define my fears in 2020 versus my goals? We've been institutionalized to define our goals. And this is the time of year, hey, Scott Bader, how's it going? This is the time of year now where we should be in the planning stages of 2020. We should be looking ahead now. We're about 2 months out. Hey, thank you, Seth. How's it going? And so I want to challenge you. I just got done watching this great video. It was actually a TED Talk by Tim Ferris. And he says we should define our fears versus our goals. And I'll kind of talk to you a little bit about that. Hey, Wesley, thank you for joining me. And as you drop in, please let me know where you're watching from in the chat. And if you're watching the replay, please use hashtag replay. Again, my name is Kirby Ingles. I'm a leadership and transformation coach, as well as a father of four and a U.S. Army veteran. And today we're talking about defining your fears versus actually establishing goals for 2020. And you're like, why would I do that, right? Well, because you need or accomplish your fears. You need to go beyond your fears. You need to get outside of your comfort zone and push your boundaries. And the first thing I want to kind of talk to you about, right, is awareness, right? Having awareness of the fear and what it is. Define it. Understand why you have that fear, why it's causing so much havoc in your lifetime. For me, I'll use a personal example. I grew up moving from one location to the other all the time. I never had a solid group of friends. And the ones that I did have, I was stuck with those one or two individuals through and through. I just had this feeling in my body, growing up that, nobody really cared about me. Nobody really cared, what I would amount to. And I just didn't trust anybody. I felt like people were always stepping on me. And so I had a huge lack of trust. And that evolved into my adult years as difficulty in my relationships. And I felt that I either had to dominate or control my relationships so that I wouldn't get stepped on and pushed out of the way. And I needed to overcome that and allow people to trust me and love me and care for me. Hey, Chris Belcher, how are you? Thank you for joining us. And so that's one of the things, one of my personal examples of fear. And I'll use a couple more here as we go. But you need to investigate those fears. Investigate them. Just like you would if you were an investigator on a police force or an inspector general or something like that. Hey, Ryan McMurrow, thank you for joining us. Ryan O'Donnell. My name is Kirby Ingles, and I'm a leadership and transformation coach, an Army veteran, and a father of four. And today we are talking about defining our fears versus establishing goals in the year 2020. And so one of the things that you want to do is identify why these fears are causing havoc in your life, right? And then you have to be present in your fears, right? Understand them. Understand what they're doing to you. One of the things that I had to overcome was the fear of public speaking. I actually went to a Toastmasters club one time and walked by the door several times and just wouldn't go in. I peered through the window, walked by, looked through the window again, and I did that like maybe 5 or 6 times. I actually left. I didn't even go in. And then the next time, a couple weeks later, I came back to the next meeting, and I actually finally had drummed up the courage to actually go in and sit down. My thought process, the facts that I had, and my own bias, was controlling my fears. I had no idea what a Toastmasters club was about. I was only speculating, and that was preventing me from nurturing a career in public speaking. And so I went into this first meeting, and everybody was very friendly. I was watching these folks up there, and then people would call them up there, and they would ask them a question, and they had 2 minutes to answer that question on the spot. It's what you call impromptu speaking, or table topics, as the Toastmasters has trademarked that term. And so I was like, oh man, I don't want to do that. I can't talk for 2 minutes straight about myself or anything else that somebody asked me on the spot. I hate being put on the spot. And while I was a little bit younger, with 3 or 4 years prior to that, I remember somebody saying to me, you need to stop tap dancing around the answer. Because I was always afraid to tell them, exactly what was going on. And I would kind of tap dance around the issue a lot. And I remember that. And that was very vivid in my head. And I allowed that thought that somebody else put in my head to control my fear. And I would always get like sweaty palms when I was going into briefings because I was afraid that they were always going to attack me, that I was going to be the bearer of bad news when it wasn't me that I was reporting on other people. And I just got sweaty palms. I could feel it in my chest. I got the butterflies in my gut, and that fear controlled me, and it probably hurt my performance. And as you know, as I gone through this process, and I was talking in front of large groups of people. And so I'd gotten through that first Toastmasters meeting, and then I left and I never joined. It took me 2 more years before I would see a flyer on the wall in an education center before I would go to my first one. And I went into that meeting, and then I finally joined, and I decided, I was like, enough's enough, you can't be scared of talking, right? Especially in front of people, especially about topics that I'm passionate about, that I love, that I'm well versed in. I can't be afraid to do that. I need to communicate my message to the world. And so I need to overcome this fear of public speaking. And I started practicing the craft for about 6 months. And a speech competition came up. And nobody from our club was actually going to go to the speech competition. Nobody would raise their hand. Nobody volunteered. And I'm sitting there like, somebody's got to represent this club. And I just wasn't there yet. I still had a fear of public speaking, and I was only practicing my craft in front of a small group of people, let alone go to a competition and speak in front of people that I didn't even met yet. I didn't even know. And I didn't even know what the topic is going to be about, because as soon as I stepped up on stage, they were going to ask me a question, and I had 2 minutes to answer that question. And I couldn't stall. I couldn't do anything. I had no preparation time. And so I went to that first contest, and I did some of the tricks, that they would tell you. I listened to some motivational music going in there to kind of pump up my, myself a little bit. And I did some poses in the bathroom, to kind of build up my confidence like they tell you to do, all those tips and techniques. And I went in there, and as soon as I got on that stage, walked in there tall, looking good, dressed sharp, feeling confident. Got on stage and they asked me a question, and I nailed it. I actually hit a home run that day. It was amazing. And I walked away with so much more confidence that day that I won that contest. And then I went to the next contest, which was the next level up, and I won that contest. And then I went to the third contest, and I could feel that fear coming back into me, that anxiety, those butterflies, And even though I struggled at that contest, and I didn't do as well as I wanted to, and at some moment I kind of felt like, I embarrassed myself. I let myself down. I let other people down. The amount of people that came up to me afterwards and complimented me and said, that was a very difficult question that they asked you, and I couldn't do that myself. And they told me about their fear of public speaking and why they were there. And so I was able to be an inspiration for other people. Hey, Ryan Harrigan, thank you for joining us. Daniel Claybrook, thank you. It's been a long time, Daniel. And so I had to overcome those fears with the fear of public speaking. And so you really have to change your perspective on fear, because when I was at that Toastmasters meeting and I was just like, you know what, forget it. I'll join, right? I changed my perspective on it. I was like, what's the worst that could happen? I could fail and learn something from it. That's where you have that growth mindset. When you take on your fears, you will actually achieve more goals than you set out to. So your negative feelings begin to go away, and you begin to start looking at the positive outcomes. There's a technique that we sometimes teach, and especially when somebody's fears are having them spiral out of control. And this technique is really the thought comes into your head like, oh no, this is going to be bad. I'm scared. I don't want to do this. This is going to be challenging. And so the first thing I would suggest that you do when these fears or these thoughts start to come into your mind is think of the worst thing that could possibly happen. Everything. Just write it down on a piece of paper. Everything. The worst possible things that could happen. My house could collapse. My car might fall in a sinkhole. Just think of all the wildest, the worst case possible scenarios that can happen, right? In regards to your fear. And then start thinking about, okay, what's the most amazing thing that could happen if I actually try to overcome my fear? And it could be ridiculous, right? Say, if I overcome my fear of public speaking, then I'm going to get a trip to Disney World for free. Or if I overcome my fear of starting a business, I can make, $1 million in the first month. That's possible, but likely not going to happen unless you just have that golden nugget. And so you think it's just some really ridiculous, positive things that are going to happen. And then as you begin to feel your body shift, because you're going to start laughing at some of the ridiculous thoughts that you're going to think about, your body begins to shift, right? Internally, you begin to feel the shift. And then you can start writing down the likelihood of things that are going to happen. And you're going to see that some of those things aren't really that bad. Another way you can, overcome your fears or the thoughts that are coming into your head is just by reframing it, Well, that may be true, and then state a fact, right? And to counter your fear, and that's just another technique is reframing it into reality. And so you just need to be courageous and just pretend like, like I told you about when I came on that stage for that competition that very first time. I pretended that I was a prize fighter. My buddy was like pumping me up and giving me all the support and stuff. But, our thing is I was to be that prize fighter. I was in a boxing match and I was going to knock out, this fear of public speaking. And so I walked up there feeling like and pretending like I was already the champion. And once I got that first repetition of fear of public speaking out of the way, everything else after that wasn't as bad because I'd already experienced the awkwardness of the moment. It's kind of like the first time I ever jumped out of an airplane, right? Lots of fears, lots of excitement, lots of all kinds of emotions doing that. But the first time you go out it's very intense, right? And so many thoughts of fear going through your head. What if this happens? What if this happens? What if my parachute doesn't open up? What if I land wrong? What if I break my leg on the drop zone? What if my parachute, the wind blows and takes my parachute and drags me across the field? There's just so many possibilities of fear that could possibly happen and so many things that could go wrong. But once you do it once, it's like, oh, wow. And then the next time you do it, and then the next time you do it, and then the next time you do it, through repetition, your fear starts to go away. And then before you know it, you look back and it's like, wow. Think about it, right? Think about when you first learned how to walk. You were scared probably, right? And then you took that first step and the excitement hit, right? Like, oh, I did it. And then you took 2 or 3 more and you did it. Watch your kids. Your kids are scared, right? They're always terrified. They don't want to do it. They want to hold your hands the whole time. And as you let go or you distract them and they start to do it on their own, their eyes light up. And they've overcome their fear. And then before you know it, you're pulling them off of everything, right? And you can't keep them under control. I know I got 4 of them. I got lots of practice. I wish I had 2 more sets of arms for all 4. And so that's kind of how you do it. So, and also here, think about this, right? As you start to, chase after your fears, think about the courageous men that have come before you. Think about the Essex, which is the ship that Moby Dick was made after, the novel. Essex was a ship from Massachusetts in 1799 that was down around about 1,000 miles off of Chile and about 12,000 miles from home. This is 1799, and very, very primitive navigation instruments, probably very limited food. They probably hunted and fished for most of their food that they had. Probably had very limited supplies. But as they were on these long rowing fishing boats, a sperm whale actually destroyed their ship while they were hunting for the whale. And this is based off a true story. The Essex was a actual event that happened in history. These guys were stranded in these long rowing boats about 1,000 miles off of Chile. They had to face their fear. They had very limited navigation instruments and very limited supplies. They had to overcome their fears. Think about Shackleton when he was, down there in the Antarctica, stuck, and all those men, right? And the fears started setting in, and they still made it, right? They still made it. Think about the founding fathers that created this country and their fears as they began to revolt against the British Empire and the fears that they had. Think about all the fears of all the men and women that have come before you and the things that they had to. In my family history, just to kind of tell you another personal story, is my family was one of the first settlers west of the Allegheny Mountains, and around the 1657, 47, somewhere in there, I can't remember. They settled in Virginia near Blacksburg, Virginia, and they were down there, and they had to deal with the fear of the unknown in the frontier. Only certain people had gone out that far into Tennessee and other places, and they had to overcome that, right? An unknown land, an uncharted territory, new species, new flowers, new forests, new everything. They had no idea what was going on, and they survived. They overcame their fears. And they overcame their fears because of the pursuit of greater reward at the end of the day. And that's what motivated it. So what motivates you? What motivates you to overcome your fears? What is that going to be? So I got a free ebook that I want to give you. And the things that I've talked about up to this point are the first 7. Hey, Dan Dwyer, how's it going? Stephen O'Donnell, Mark Perez, and Robert Garcia. Appreciate you guys joining me. And so I have this free ebook. I just covered the first 7 tips of many tips that I give for overcoming fear. And I want to give that to you for free. So I'm going to drop the link below. And if that's something that interests you, go ahead and check it out. And if you like it, please let me know what you think about it. And that's all we have for tonight. Keep overcoming your fears, establish those fears, define those fears, overcome them in 2020. And let's see if you can make a difference. Rather than, doing the whole traditional institutional goal setting thing, let's pursue our fears and become more bold and courageous. And thanks for joining me, John Krotek. Appreciate that. Appreciate the likes, buddy. And Dan Dwyer, thank you for the likes as well. So overcome your fears in 2020. All right. And I'll talk to you soon. Keep fighting the good fight.